what I wanted to share with you is how we see at Coursera the effects of automation and the effects of COVID-19 on the workforce of tomorrow, and how that affects DevOps and the roles in DevOps teams directly. I've been working with many of our key customers across the region, and we see a key demand for the skills that many people in DevOps use, as well as augmenting the existing teams and reskilling the non-DevOps regarded teams into new roles in those organizations. So first of all, let's have a look what we see from the World Economic Forum. We knew already that digitization and automation were gathering speed across the last 5-10 years or so. But what COVID did was accelerate this need. As people were working from home, as more and more people were isolating because of COVID, the need to become digital was all the more apparent. And this also included this new scaling of remote work. So you see there, this is a report from the United States, but we see that 83% of companies had to scale their remote work capabilities in order to keep their business running and to keep their employees connected. What we also see is that the emerging job opportunities, so this is looking at the jobs that are being presented as available by all different types of industries and all different areas of the world, really are ones that are typically found in DevOps teams and data-centric teams. If we see some of the report delivered by Microsoft about where the digital job capacity is moving in the next 5 years, we see this huge explosion of DevOps type roles across software development, cloud and data roles. And this is only going to grow with time. And again, this is permeating all industries across the world. And what that is leading to, and we've seen this mainly in more developed countries, is what Forbes have called a tech talent war. And quite simply, the root cause of this tech talent war is the demand for people with tech talent and experience in technology and DevOps related roles far exceeds the current supply. And what we're seeing is a shortage of suitable applicants for those roles out there. So we see from Hayes, the recruitment agency, that 79% of technology employees say they cannot find the talent they need. We also hear from people who are in these roles already that when they are thinking about roles, some of their key aspects they're looking at are nothing to do with pay or salary or some of the more obvious things that companies offer their employees. They're really looking for technically interesting challenges, things that's going to drive them to come to work every day and want to solve problems. We're also seeing the need for programmers to really understand, for employees to really understand the need to be flexible with the environments people work, because now this hybrid way of working is very much here to stay. Many different people have found they've benefited from working from home, and it's given them that healthy work-life balance. There is a second aspect to the tech talent war, which is that resignations are increasing across the tech sector. So why is this happening? Well, first of all, 36% of people who have resigned from their job in the last 12 months have said the increased workload and burnout caused by that is the #1 factor for them. And this is simply, again, back to that supply and demand. There's not enough people in these roles, and therefore more and more is expected from the people in those roles. Therefore, because of this employee strength we see now, people have that choice and can say, you know, this work is not working for me. I'm going to go and find an employer that allows me technical challenges, but more flexible hours. We're also seeing in the same survey that 29% said there was a lack of opportunities for job growth. So that is around, are there more challenges around for them? Are they able to develop their skills in new areas of business? Or are they actually being held back because there is so much of a need for the core parts of their jobs? The other thing that we're seeing is that small and medium companies are likely far heavily impacted by this compared to your big global tech giants, because they are the ones, the small and medium companies, that don't have the resources to be as flexible. And they also the ones with less brand power to attract and retain those key workers when they see that they have the choice around them. So they have to bring something new to the table in order to maintain their current talent, but also attract the new talent that we already seen in the previous slides that they're going to need to attract. This was actually the headline for what this Forbes article, the tech talent has no end in sight, effectively saying that there's going to be a race to the bottom or race to the top, whichever way you want to describe it, whereas the ones with the deepest pockets and the most flexibility will get the talent and be able to progress their business goals. And the ones who can't afford it will fall behind and eventually fail as a business because they don't have the technical capabilities to deliver to their customers. But I want to present to you a slightly different view of this. And here's the first thing I want to show you. When asked by the Essam Institute to companies again in the US, how has the pandemic influenced their company's training? What you can see is an overwhelming result that they've all invested heavily in training, almost across the board. Interestingly for me is this one here. And this is saying that nearly 80% of all companies are looking at reskilling their existing employees into new roles and new technical roles in the company. But there is a second source of potential workers who could come into the technology industry who are not considered in this list. And this brings me back to another effect we saw on the global workforce during the pandemic. And what we've seen is a huge shift across the globe of people moving out of work, either through unemployment or inactivity. And this led to 8% of the global working hours lost last year. This affected over 80% of all the workforce around the world who are affected by workplace closures. And this was a far greater impact than the financial crisis we saw back in 2008. The other thing that we saw was it was those jobs that were most at risk of automation were the ones that were actually made redundant and lost their jobs, as well as being completely displaced from the workplace in furlough schemes or other government schemes to keep them being paid. And therefore, this actually presents a huge opportunity for both governments and institutes and companies to reskill new talent into their companies. Because what we can do is we can bring these people into the in-demand jobs. We can give them knowledge, digital skills, and credentials for them to move from these vulnerable jobs into these high-demand jobs that we want, that we've seen already in the DevOps industry. At Coursera, we provide that learning for people to transform their careers. And we see from our survey that we did last year across all of our learners that we have on the Coursera platform, that many feel that the skills that they're developing on Coursera has helped them improve their candidacy for new positions, better equip them for their current work, and also they've seen raises or promotions in their work as well. We've also seen that there is possibilities for people who have previously not had the higher education background to use Coursera to develop those core skills required at the entry level for those in-demand jobs, where they can start their career after 3 to 6 months of training and start adding value in their companies as web developers, as engineers, and as product owners. And you can see how this entry-level job can, through continued learning and continued experience, really set them up for many different careers in technical areas. And we have many different studies that we have done that track out these paths through learning on Coursera. And we're also seeing, speaking to our industry partners, that they are more and more seeing that postgraduate or non-graduate professional certificates are having as much weight as people coming out of universities, because they recognize that universities can be prohibitively expensive for some people, but also they want to see people with the cutting edge latest skills in these technical areas. One of the studies we have done with one of our partners, which I don't have on the slides today, estimated the shelf life of technical skills. And depending on which area looked at, it was between 2 and 5 years of shelf life for any one of these technical skills before they became obsolete or had limited value, because a new technology has already come along that has surpassed it. We're also seeing that reskilling into in-demand digital roles is achievable for people who want to do so on Coursera, because we have a suite of different tools for them to use. We have professional certificates from our institute partners, such as IBM, which will allow them to showcase their ability to start adding value in those roles. We have this across different technologies with our different providers. And we also have specializations from some of our other learning partners that really allow people to develop deep learning and deep skills into these high in demand roles. So these are just some examples of those that we have on Coursera. And these are also being used by governments, by universities themselves, and as well by companies around the world in reskilling their employees for new jobs in the company. Now, what I haven't talked about yet is, what about remote working? What is the change we're seeing there in remote working? And let's put it this way, we have to go back to why is this important for DevOps? And to do that, we have to see that many of these jobs being done in DevOps today, the architecture, engineering, computer science, software development, all of these can be seen as jobs that can be easily done from home. All you need is a good internet connection and the right software, and off you go. You can do this job from home fairly efficiently and effectively. And so from a company point of view, there's a lot of cost saving to be done by having your engineers work from home. It also means that from a locality point of view, you can hire people from all over the world and not be restricted by locations of where your offices are in terms of your footprint for your staff. So from a company point of view, this is a great situation to be in for hiring and shaping DevOps teams. But what about the team themselves? Well, for that, let's look back for where DevOps came from. More than 15 years ago now, when DevOps really first came onto the scene. The primary purpose for DevOps was all around breaking down siloed teams. Your teams from development, design, infrastructure, UI, UX, and of course your operations team who work with your customers, who all work separately in different silos and all owned one piece of that pipeline in terms of delivery. And what we wanted to do was turn organizations on their side. So teams had all of the parts they needed to fully design, own, create a product themselves. We also wanted to create T-shaped individuals, which means that all of your individuals could do some part of other people's jobs, and they could fill in where needed if in fact you had to swarm on ideas or so on. Therefore, you could have people who had only really been customer support in the past, now doing some scripting themselves, design work themselves, managing infrastructure themselves as well. It also fostered a very strong sense of team culture, because we empowered teams to make decisions and own the product lifecycle as well. And through that team culture, we had empathy for each other's roles and each other's talents. And these were very key and important for creating what became DevOps, a team of collaborators all working together. And I've deliberately picked this picture because what you can see is people together talking and collaborating together. And through this, what was the purpose of doing this? We saw great improvements in speed and scale, first and foremost. We had rapid delivery of new features and new ideas. We had improved reliability because we had all parts of the chain talking to each other, making sure that everything was correct. And then with the new developments of DevSecOps, we now have increased security of our products as well, which of course is very important now that we've moved to a cloud-based world from most of our solutions. So this was a great triumph for DevOps and why it's been so successful and being adopted across many industries. But what has the pandemic done? It's now created a new silo, the silo of one. people by themselves working alone in their offices. And this effectively means that you lose a lot of that collaboration space. You lose that strong team culture, that empathy for other people's roles, that ownership and feeling of belonging to your team. And this is probably the key change to how DevOps are going to have to learn to work now, in that you no longer will have primarily all your team in one location. And I remember when, in one of my previous roles, when we did roll out DevOps to our software engineering organization, one of our key finds, and one of the ones we actually changed, was co-location saw a dramatic improvement in many of the things we just described. And we actually changed all of our structure, what we had, to, instead of having teams where we had effectively one person from each of the old silos in one team, we changed it so we built teams who were all in the same location and then trained up those teams in the skills they needed, because that was seen as a much more successful way of implementing a team DevOps focus. So this is a key challenge for DevOps going forward. So what can we do about this? I've broken this down into 2 levels. First, I want to say is that action at all levels is required. But the 2 levels I'm going to talk about are leaders of DevOps teams and organizations, and then I'll talk about individuals in DevOps teams. And I've just picked 3 or 4 key ideas. I actually had a huge list of them when I first started writing this slide, and I wanted to cut it down to things that we could share succinctly and key ideas to take away. So the number 1 thing I've put here for leadership is that need to communicate often and across multiple channels the key company goals and values. This is really going to drive home that sense of belonging to a company and understanding why you're doing your job. Secondly, leaders need to actively champion the behaviors that they see necessary for success. And this means recognizing individuals and recognizing teams that exonerate that behavior they want for success. And the last one is really invest in technology that will maximize the value of collaboration. Now, technology here, I've put very loosely. This is not just IT technology, but this is also when you have some physical space as well. So we don't just need rows of desks anymore where people can sit all day long. We do need spaces that will allow people, when they are together, to really maximize their collaboration, work together, ideate new things, and make the most of their ceremonies that they have during the life cycle of their Agile DevOps program. We do have a really good course on how to manage a remote team offered by GitHub on Coursera, which you can see has a 4.8 rating. It's very highly recommended, which can certainly help our leadership team understand that the nuances of using remote teams to deliver DevOps products. Now let's move on to the individuals. What can they do in order to maximize the value of themselves in this now remote way of working? The first thing I've put on here is take ownership of your own development, because you're not going to have people bouncing ideas off each other as much. There's less chance to learn from each other because you're working separately. And your manager or your supervisor will not really have that oversight on what you're doing well and not so well every single day. Therefore, understanding what's available in terms of development, where your own weaknesses are, and challenging your management to make those resources available so you can develop on your own, and making space in your schedule to do that is very, very important. I've put there maximize value of ceremonies, because going back to my experience of people transitioning into DevOps and agile ways of working, quite often people thought that ceremonies were just ticking box exercises half the time. But actually, the more that they're used to add value, to understand what's going on, the better they are. And therefore, really maximize these values to ensure that everyone understands their role in the next sprint or the next program increment. It's very, very important. For those who've been in DevOps teams for many years, be a mentor to people who are new. As we've mentioned in the previous slides, there's going to be a lot of new people coming into this way of working, and they will not have the experience of working in a team all in the same location, and therefore are going to have to be doing a lot of self-learning. But if we can have mentors in the team that can help them along the way, That's a great thing for them to get up to speed and really feel part of the team and add value as well. And the last thing I want to say is focus on well-being, because we saw the number one reason for people leaving their jobs was that overburden and burnout from too much demand on them. And again, there is emphasis on management to manage this as well, but it has to start with the individual recognizing their limits, recognizing their own stress levels that they can cope with. And the most popular course on Coursera from 2020 was the science of well-being, which is a direct relation to people feeling that strain from working in a pandemic world. And so I highly recommend people who are feeling a bit under the strain right now, taking this course and understanding how best to manage themselves. The last thing I just want to say is keep your project tools up to date, because I've been in that situation when you're trying to understand what your teams are up to and everything is out of date, things aren't being updated. So this will be a great help to everyone in your team, all of your leadership team as well, and anyone who is a stakeholder in your projects. Thank you very much, everyone. It was a pleasure to talk to you today.